Hello world and welcome to Learning Java, one byte at a time. This is the 8th video in a tutorial series geared at bringing the wonderful wide world of Java to those with little or no programming experience. The past few videos have given us a little exposure to writing some basic code, understanding how to compile and run that code, and getting just a small understanding of the nuts and bolts of Java in general. Before moving forward with any more programming, I want to spend this video talking about errors and the different types of errors you're likely to encounter. In Java, there are essentially two different types of errors. There are compilation errors, or errors that happen when trying to compile the code, and there are runtime errors, which, as the name would suggest, happen while the code is actually trying to execute. Now, both types of errors are unique, and getting an understanding of how to do a root cause analysis, how to identify these errors, troubleshoot and debug, and then eventually provide solutions for these errors is essential in trying to become a great programmer. Now, Java actually does a pretty good job of flagging these errors and helping you find them quickly, and in some cases even does a pretty good job of providing potential solutions. But the way that Java flags these errors and displays them is a little confusing if you don't have the right eye for it. So let's go ahead and produce a couple of these errors ourselves so that we can get some practice understanding what it looks like when Java catches these errors and then how to handle them. So, before moving forward, let's imagine that you are an engineer and you are trying to design something, let's say a bridge or something like that. So there are two different steps in the design process. One of them has to be designed conceptually. So just as an idea, you have to have a schematic or a blueprint with what it is you're trying to build. And then after that is when the construction process happens, when you actually begin to build it in the real physical world. And so when a compilation error happens, that's Java letting us know that, hey, conceptually, just as an idea, just on paper, this thing fails. It would be like trying to design a square with 5 right angles. Just mathematically, that's infeasible. It wouldn't even work on paper. Whereas a runtime error happens during the program flow, it just logistically fails. It would be like trying to access an index of an array that's larger than that actual array, or trying to divide by 0. So as an engineer, that would be like building the bridge out of toothpicks. Now on paper it works, like mathematically it's sound and it will actually work conceptually, but if you build a bridge out of toothpicks, that thing's going to fail in the real world. Physically it's just not going to work. So we'll go ahead and make a couple of these errors. We'll generate them ourselves so that we can see what they look like. And we'll start by jumping into our Notepad++ app. I have here a new blank file that I've called test.java, and I'm going to go ahead and write just a basic class file, and in that class file I'm going to put our main method, and then we're going to see if we can't intentionally generate some compilation errors. So here we have our class file, we have our obligatory entry point, the main method, and this may look familiar to you because, as I've said before, it never changes. We'll go ahead and save this. And now, those of you that are keener than most might actually already know the error that we're going to have happen. If you've been paying close attention, you might already know what's going to happen, but let's go ahead and compile it, and we'll let Java do the footwork for us to see what happens. So we'll open up our command line, and I'm going to attempt to compile this file. And here we go, all sorts of interesting things from Java here telling us that we have an error. It's letting us know that this is in the test class, that it's a Java error, and that the error is happening on the method in line 3. And now if we go down here and we look at line 3, we can actually see this is in fact the method that we were trying to use to generate the error. It goes on to say that the error type is an invalid method declaration. Alright, so something about the way that we're declaring this method is not valid. So, if we go on, it says, return type required. And as we mentioned before in other videos, methods can be evaluated. A function can actually have a value. And so if you call a function, it's supposed to return a value, even if that value is nothing at all, in which case it would be a void method. And so, if you remember, the main method has to be a public static void method because the main method returns nothing. And as we go on to see, right here Java, using this fun little arrow, points out that right there before the main, I was expecting a return type, the public static something main method. And so right off the bat, Java does a pretty good job of helping us out by letting us know there's no return type, I'm expecting a return type, and I'm expecting it right about right there. So let's go ahead and fix that by inserting our return type. We'll save that file and we'll try to compile it again. And there we are. This time it actually compiles. So not too shabby, actually. Let's go ahead and try to create another compilation error. Now in this case, I'm attempting to print out to the screen a variable which we haven't declared named test. Go ahead and save that and see if that produces a compilation error. And in fact it does. It says, hey, even on paper this thing doesn't work out. You're telling me that there's this variable named test. I don't know where it is and I don't know what it means. So right here in the test class, the Java error on line 5 cannot find symbol. And the symbol it's pointing to, literally pointing to right there, is the test symbol. And so it goes on to tell us it's a symbol, it's a variable named test, it's in the location of class test, and this is the one error that I'm finding. All right, not too bad. So let's go in there and rather than using a variable, let's go ahead and use a literal string of text because we know that that should work. We'll save that and we'll attempt to recompile it. And there we are, it compiles just fine. All right, let's do one more just for kicks. Now let's say that we do have that fixed, but let's say that I forget to put my semicolon, like so. We'll recompile this. And here we are again. All right, right here on line 5. Which as we see is that same command. Error, hey, I was expecting a semicolon. And I was expecting it literally right there, right at the end of that line of code. And that's the one error that I've detected. So how helpful is that? So we go in there, we stick in our semicolon, and just like we saw before, it will compile. And so that's an idea of a couple of different ways that it can fail on paper. Just conceptually, Java says, hey, this doesn't even compute. I don't know what to do with this. How can I construct something that doesn't even mathematically or semantically make sense? So those are compilation errors. Real quickly, we'll go ahead and get a couple of runtime errors so we can see what those look like. And in Java, they call runtime errors exceptions. So when you see an exception flagged, that's Java letting you know this is something logistically that's going wrong. This is something in the program flow that's going wrong. So what we're attempting to do now is we're attempting to print out to the screen a little arithmetic expression. We're going to do 1 divided by 0. Okay, so it does compile. On paper, theoretically, it does make sense, but now let's try to run it. And here we have, Java has flagged an exception. And it's an exception in the main method. In this particular case, it's letting us know that it's in a thread, and we'll talk a little bit more about threads in later videos and what exactly a thread is, but for now we'll just know it's in the main method. This particular type of exception is part of the Java language in the language library, and it's an error of type arithmetic exception. An exception is just an error, so it's an arithmetic error. And it goes on to tell us what kind of arithmetic error. It's a division by 0. Okay, well that's helpful. And it even tells us it's at test.main, which is the class and the method. And here it is at line 5. So saying right there at line 5, in this method, in this class, you're trying to divide by 0. And now while it's pretty obvious to us because we've literally attempted to divide by 0, what if this, instead of being true numericals, what if it was a couple of numerical variables? And by some occurrence outside of our understanding throughout the program flow, we had changed one variable to 0 and then performed the mathematical operation without it being known to us that it was changed to 0. That would be a way of us being able to quickly see, oh, we are in fact dividing by 0. So Let's try something else. Alright, so shouldn't be too tricky, but if you want to take a second to pause the video to see if you can see exactly what's going to happen with this particular type of runtime error, and if not, we'll go ahead and let Java do the footwork. We'll recompile it, which it does in fact compile, so it's not going to fail on paper. Now let's actually try to run it. Here we go. Here's the exception. Here's the error. In the main method, this error is of type array index out of bounds. And that's the exception. That's the error. It goes on to tell us index 3 is out of bounds for length 2. And as you can see right here, line 7 is where it's telling us to see the error. We go to line 7. We are in fact trying to access an index of an array of length 3 for an array that we have previously told Java is only going to be two indexes long. And so what we're essentially trying to do is we're trying to access an index that doesn't exist. We're out of bounds with this particular array. And Java does a pretty good job of letting us know that. That's the array index out of bounds exception. So one of the reasons that we're going through this is because just having seen this without understanding the background, it looks like just a bunch of text. I mean, it's really hard to kind of parse through this, and there's a lot of information here. So that's one of the purposes of going through it just like this. Anyway, I hope this video has been informative. I hope it's given you a better idea of the differences between compilation errors and runtime errors, how to actually read the flagging of those exceptions, how to source and debug those, and then how we can see that Java actually does a pretty good job of providing a solution to those errors. It's not perfect, but in most cases, it'll at least get you pointed in the right direction. And since debugging happens to be an enormous part of the whole coding procedure, it's useful to understand how to quickly debug these things and how to get them taken care of. So in the next video, we're going to talk a little bit more about the conceptuality of Java. We'll talk about objects and classes and just conceptually what they are, and then we'll go from there. So I hope this has been enjoyable. I really appreciate having you all here with these videos, and have a beautiful day. We'll see you soon.